Um, Welcome everyone. I'm the main host this evening, certainly for the technical aspects, and just on that, a few words at the start. You've all been muted initially. Later you can unmute yourselves or use the chat button if you want to communicate or say anything or ask a question. We'd really invite you to participate. Also, the session is being recorded and will be available to view later on. If you've registered through Eventbrite, then you'll get the link to the recording. And we just love to see all your faces. So if you're happy to leave your camera on, that would be great. Also, James would like everyone later to, do a little bit of work in breakout rooms. So that's just going to happen once when he's finished speaking for about 10 minutes. So just to let you know that's going to happen, and we'll arrange those rooms at the appropriate time. And so now I just hand you over to Terry, who's going to do the main introductions for this evening.
Thanks, Mary, and hello again, and a warm welcome to those who were with us before. Many of you may have been here before with us for previous talks, and to anyone new joining us, you're very welcome for the first time. My name is Terry O'Sullivan, and I'm a volunteer with the steering group of Elders for Earth. This evening's talk is one of a monthly series of talks organised by Elders for Earth, which is part of SHEP Earth Aware, and which is a branch of community education and development group called SHEP, the Social and Health Education Project, based in Cork. Our group tries to bring together the idea of eldering and activism for climate and biodiversity issues, but it also sees the cultivation of a spiritual foundation as very important for earth work. This is our first Spirituality and the Earth series of 2022, and we have invited speakers to give personal views from their particular traditions of faith. This evening we are very happy to have James Nelson of the South Belfast Quaker meeting to talk to us. So his talk is titled Spirituality and the Earth, a view from the Quaker tradition, which you've probably seen from the poster. So a little background to James. James is a member of the South Belfast Quaker meeting, a member of the meeting's Eco Quaker group, and a Quaker representative on the Irish Council of Churches. He's a senior lecturer in Queen's University Belfast in the School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work, and the Senator George J. Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, Security and Justice. A core research interest is the interface between religion and education. Another is in the area of teacher education. James also has contributed towards goal number 4 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal 4 is about quality education. Quality, not equality, but both, I'm sure. The full title is Ensure Inclusive and Equitable Quality Education and Promote Lifelong Learning Opportunities for All. Eco Quakers Ireland is a Committee of Ireland yearly meeting that supports Quaker meetings in their efforts to live peacefully and sustainably. Eco Quakers believe that care for the environment is an integral part of the Quaker tradition and links closely with the Quaker testimonies of peace, simplicity, truth, and equality. As a member of the South Belfast Eco Quaker group, James has contributed to their series of civic conversations relating to the challenges of the ecological and climate emergencies, as well as enabling a process of learning together and from a diversity of perspectives, initiatives, and stories. The Eco Quaker conversations are intended to help us look for ways to enact constructive responses for the common good. Something for us all to learn here. So before James comes to speak to us, he requests that we might have a little bit of quiet, maybe a minute's silence, just to come back to ourselves with all of that and before he starts. So thank you very much. James will come in when he's ready.
Thank you so much, Terry, and to the organising group of Elders for Earth. I already feel like I'm among friends in the few times that I've had the opportunity to meet you. So it's been lovely to feel welcomed here. I'm just going to share my screen and I have a few slides that I want to share with you. So just bear with me, please. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much, Terry. That was a lot. I wasn't expecting to hear so much about myself, but thank you very much for that introduction. I hope I can live up to the billing. I am, as Terry said, a Quaker from South Belfast Meeting, and I'm delighted to have been invited along, and I'm grateful that those of you who have turned up have committed to listen to what I have to say for the next 30 or 40 minutes. As Terry said, the title for the session is Spirituality in the Earth, a View from the Quaker Tradition. And I know that spirituality in the earth theme is something that's very, very familiar to you, but I hope to bring a Quaker lens. But what is a Quaker view or a Quaker lens on this issue? Well, we are a people without creeds, without doctrine, and largely without a grand narrative about very much. So you'll not be surprised when I tell you that I bring you multiple views. I hope that these aren't seen to be competing views, but different angles from which to see the scene before us. And what is that scene? Well, the scene is this moment or moment in Earth's history, this point along the long arc of the moral universe where our choices as a species probably matter more than at any other point before. But as I present this evening, my choices, while influenced by a Quaker tradition, are unashamedly subjective, and my treatment will be fragmentary. I'm not here really to argue for one position or convince you of doctrine, but I'm going to try to paint a picture, or better still, to create a pattern that comes into focus as I proceed. And that's the reason I chose this image to begin. There'll be some history, personal reflection, and poetry and pictures, more pictures along the way. And as Terry said, there'll also be questions, because I'm very much committed to engaging not just in talking to you, but in hearing the wisdom in the room. And I think it's better for us all if we can engage in some conversation. So I've dotted these questions through the presentation. And if you like, if you have a pen and you want to make a note of them, that's fine. But they will be available at the end in the chat box, and Mary or Frank will share them with you. I'll try to leave a few pauses along the way anyway, if you do want to make a note. But just to give you a sense of where I'm going in the next half hour or so, I want to set out my structure. So what are these views from the Quaker tradition that I want to share with you? Well, I've grouped them under these headings. The first one is personal, so I will tell you a little bit about myself and my own spiritual journey. The second view I'm calling ancestral. The third one is an artistic perspective. And the last two is a view from below and a view from above. These may not seem very obvious maybe at the moment, but I hope they'll become clear as I proceed. So, of course, everything tonight is a personal view to an extent. It is an expression of what's troubling me, motivating me, and nourishing me from within my tradition and beyond that speaks to me at this particular moment of climate crisis. And I would say that I'm borrowing from a wide range of Quaker sources, and we're very lucky to have some excellent writers within the tradition on spirituality and environmental and sustainability issues, like Alistair McIntosh and Douglas Gwynn. But I'm also borrowing from other traditions as well, because within the Quaker tradition, we believe that the truth or the light can be seen in many, many different places. We're not the only ones who have access to it. As Terry commented, I also have an academic interest in religion, and early on I took degrees in religious studies in Belfast and then subsequently in Lancaster, which led me into a career in religious education and then an academic career. Indeed, my first encounter with Quakers was a lecture in my undergraduate course in church history about Quakers and George Fox. And it was there that I found out about the Religious Society of Friends, that it was established in the 17th century, that they were mockingly called Quakers for shaking during worship. I learned that they don't have clergy, icons, creeds, or set prayers. There are no altars or hymns, but they wait silently, or as Fox would put it, stand still in the light. At the time, I had had enough of forms of religion that sort of constrained and regulated me. So the freedom of this group appealed, and my curiosity was roused enough to go along one morning in 1990 or around then to my nearest meeting house. And there was indeed no clergy, no icons, creeds, set prayers, altars, or hymns. Mind you, there was no shaking either. And unfortunately, though, there was no connection. There was nothing to draw me back. And from that point, I pretty much let go of organized religion. And while I regarded myself as a seeker of sorts, there wasn't too much seeking going on. I wasn't terribly proactive. Life was too busy, too important. And that is until really it burnt me out. I'll not go into the details, but it did take a few years to truly recover. And it was in that period, 2004, 2006, that gradually I understood that my body had a voice, and not just the one in my vocal cords, but another at a deeper level. And it was then at that point, when I began to go to yoga, that it was explained to me that it had a name. This voice resided in my heart center. And with the help of yoga and Zen, I began to heal, not just physically, but spiritually, and to open myself to new spiritual experiences and insights, particularly including the one that the outer and inner were not two aspects of me, but a whole. I'll spare you all the details, but I think the important point to make is that I gathered more tools for my spiritual toolbox, to the extent that when I returned one day in 2015 to the same Quaker meeting house I'd been to all those years previous, I was able to make a connection. In fact, the connection was palpable. Very quickly, I knew this was a place where I fitted. And as time went on, it has become my natural home. As one Quaker writer puts it, it's not about deciding you're a Quaker, it's realizing that you're already one. So I've been a full member for around 3 years, and I'm not only a regular attender, but as Terry has explained, an active member of the South Belfast Eco-Quaker group. I've also had the privilege to attend and participate in island-wide Quaker meetings and gatherings of all different kinds. And it's been such a privilege to be part of this Quaker community. And I'll tell you more in detail about the Eco-Quaker group later. But the one point I want to make here is that participating in this community has added another dimension, not just the joining of the inner and outer, but as one writer, Tom Shakespeare from the Quaker tradition describes it, is to make the connection across. Quakers have a long history of social action, especially around issues of peace and social justice. And this activism arises out of a particular spiritual and moral view of the sacredness of every person. In the words of Fox, it arises out of a fundamental commitment to the insight there is that of God in everyone, as you see is on the screen. So for Quakers, changing the world and engaging in activism isn't just a secular idea about helping others, but it is a spiritual imperative. And that care for all others has, since its earliest times, also been a care for the environment. John Woolman, one of the earliest Quakers back in 1772, said, "The produce of the earth is a gift from our gracious Creator to the inhabitants, and to impoverish the earth now to support outward greatness appears to be an injury to the succeeding age." I want to argue that Woolman takes an ancestral view. He puts himself in the role of the ancestor during his own lifetime. Like an older person who plants a tree they'll never see grow to maturity, Woolman wants to extend his concern across generations, or as he calls it, the succeeding age. I'm currently researching my family tree, and I look back and see my ancestors all on the page, and I put myself very easily in the position of a descendant, not an ancestor. But Woolman reminds us and reminds me that I am also an ancestor to be. And this ancestral view continues to permeate Quaker thinking. It hasn't stayed just in 1772. I said to you earlier, we don't have doctrines or creeds, but we do occasionally issue epistles and statements and that kind of thing. And in 2012, a statement from the World Meeting of Quakers in Kabarak in Kenya about the environment warned, "We waste our children's heritage." And again in 2016, a global meeting in Peru, a statement was released that said, "To preserve this earth for our children, our grandchildren, and all future generations to come, we must work as though life were to continue for 10,000 years to come." So I think the ancestral view gives us pause for thought. We think not just of our own lives and in our own lifetime what we can do, but what comes after. As I said, I want to draw on a few other sources for this session, and one other is an ancestral view from a poet I've discovered very recently called Jane Hirschfield, and maybe you've known her for a long time, but she's very new to me. And her poem that I'm going to share with you now is called "Let Them Not Say." Let them not say, "We did not see it. We saw." Let them not say, "We did not hear it. We heard." Let them not say, "They did not taste it. We ate. We trembled." Let them not say, "It was not spoken, not written. We spoke. We witnessed with voices and hands." Let them not say, "They did nothing. We did not enough." Let them say, as they must say something, "A kerosene beauty, it burned." Let them say, "We warmed ourselves by it, read by its light, praised, and it burned." About her own poem, Hirschfield says, "It is a poem very much imagining the future, looking back on our generation, our time, and saying, how did it turn out? What did we do? What did we not do?" And it is a prayer, she says. She also says it's a poem hoping to make itself someday incomprehensible. "We don't know yet how it will turn out," she says, "and I do not want them to say we did not enough." So an ancestral view then is to see the influence of our lives way beyond the limited years of our own lifetimes. This is a heavy responsibility that Quaker documents remind us not to neglect. But taking the perspective of an ancestor-to-be also reminds us of the potential to shape and influence those younger than us now, who will be carriers of values into the future. So I have a question, and I want to finish this view with the question, what does it mean to you to think of yourself as an ancestor-to-be? So my next view is an artistic one. And for this one, I'm going to talk about the Loving Earth Project, which is a wonderful collaborative Quaker project which uses crafting to celebrate people, the planet, creatures, and things we love, but we think are being threatened by climate breakdown. And it has been a wonderful opportunity for many people to engage in creating these panels, to express their love for the earth, but also to express some of their concern. And for some people, it has motivated them to social action. There's a website, which is on the screen, with about 400 of these panels, and there are also touring exhibitions of them. So there was one at COP26 in Glasgow in the autumn. And excitingly, the panels will be touring Ireland this spring, starting in Belfast in March, and maybe coming to a venue near you. So I have yet to see them in reality, but looking at them on this website, I have already been inspired and challenged by them, and edified, I might say. So I thought that I would share some of these panels with you. Some of them are very straightforward, and the message is contained within the panels themselves, like these ones. This one, you can see a very well-known phrase, reduce, reuse, repair and recycle, or this one. And some of them, as well as speaking for themselves, require a little bit of interpretation. And the participants, the creators of these pieces of art have, as well as submitting the art, submitted a little bit of text to go with them to explain what it is that they've done. So this is one about sustainable housing, a lovely one by actually a member of our South Belfast meeting called Megan Corrigan. And you can see what her art is and also her reflection and her commitment to take some action. And I just wanted to select 3 others that I think warrant a little bit of attention. And this one I really liked. So you might want to take a moment to, if your screen's big enough and you can see this well enough, to have a bit of a look at it to see what you make of it. You might notice it's obviously in a circle. And across the middle is the Great Green Wall. And that's a project to reclaim 8,000 kilometers of land from coast to coast across North and West Africa. And on the bottom, and the people on the top represent that continent. And on the bottom, the person who created it from Leeds says that this part of the picture represents her volunteering at a pay-as-you-feel cafe and a food hub in inner city Leeds, and a project called the Real Junk Food Project. So for her, she said the image represents 2 inspiring food poverty initiatives at macro and micro levels. And if you pay enough attention, and it took me a while to get this, but there is the Taoist yin-yang shape across the middle of the Great Green Wall, reminding us that each is a part of the whole. The circumference of people denotes our unity across continents. There are no others in this crisis. So I really like this, this particular picture. A second one is this, and this is by a gentleman of 73 years old who said that he learned to sew only 3 years, when he was 70, 3 years prior to creating this. And I think it's a wonderful piece of work, and it's the oak tree. And he said, my square depicts a jay burying an acorn as part of its winter larder. Jays, in doing this, inadvertently plant new oak trees, such as the seedling on the right in the foreground. So this picture represents the interdependency of plant and animal communities. My picture, he says, I hope illustrates my delight in the beauty of the natural world, but also my bitter sadness at how we have destroyed most of the natural oak forests of the British Isles. And this is my last picture, and it's entitled Prayerful Upholding. And the creator of this says, the earth grounds us and gives us home. As the cycles of nature are disrupted, species extinction is accelerating. Human communities around the world are also being devastated by floods, droughts, heat waves, and famines, which feeds further conflict and mass migrations. We need to draw on our deepest values and spiritual resources to help us change our behavior as individuals, communities, and as a species if we are to break the cycle. We need to stop wanting to have and do more stuff, and rather to live more simply, truthfully, and lovingly. She says, I will uphold the earth and its creatures in prayer, alone and with others. I will also learn more about what is happening to our ecosystem and what I could do about it, seeking and trying to follow guidance of the Spirit. So I think you'll agree there's some wonderful pieces of art here which bear viewing, and you might want to go and have a look at some more. And maybe just in the moment, they have also prompted you to think a little bit about your relationship to the earth. And if you were to make a pledge, like some of these artists have, I wonder what your pledge would be to as a result of that. It's worth reflecting on Woolman's statement again: the produce of the earth is a gift from our gracious creator. I think I'm still comfortable with the imagery of the earth as a divine gift, to the extent that it conveys this sense of sacredness, although I would resist the toxic theological interpretation that it is therefore ours to own and do with what we like. As the poet Wendell Berry puts it, there are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. For others less inclined to religious imagery, they may prefer other ways of talking about our relationship with the earth. A term I came across recently, which may be familiar to you but was new to me, is biophilia. It is the idea that humans have an innate tendency to seek connection with nature and other forms of life. Well, we know why rooms with a view of the park sell for more than rooms with a view of a wall, but why is it really? Well, Michael McCarthy, in his wonderful book, The Moth Snowstorm, believes he knows why. He says, there persists deep inside us, deep in our genes, an immensely powerful innate bond with the natural world. I believe the bond is at the heart of what it means to be human, that the natural world where we evolved is no mere neutral background, but at the deepest psychological level, it remains our home, with all the intense emotional attachment which that implies, passionate feelings of belonging, of yearning, and of love. McCarthy goes on to say that learning to love the earth again is our best chance of slowing down the climate crisis. Our hope lies not in science, he believes, but in wonder, of finding joy in the natural world and cultivating that joy in our children. But is it that easy? Watching nature programs is lovely, but is it really going to make a difference? Are walks in the woods or strolls by the sea really where it's at? Well, to an extent, I would say. For me, and I dare say for many of those artists whose work we've just considered, loving nature engages the head and the heart. But if that love is real, then it must also engage the hand. Loving earth is, I think it's fair to say from a Quaker point of view, both a spiritual and a political activity. So I suppose just to finish this view of the artist, I have a question, my second question, and that is, how does loving earth influence your actions? Assuming that you do have a love for the earth, how does it influence your actions? Well, as I say, it is both a spiritual and political activity to love the earth. And I think the Quaker writer Alistair McIntosh is, in my view, the best communicator of this important insight. That what is required is a deep reverence for the natural world, yes, but also a spiritually grounded activism. In his words, these are matters of soil and soul, both together. And he also says that this spiritual activism involves cultivating a view from below and a view from above. And those are the two views that I want to take now. The view from below is the perspective from the ground, looking to see things as they are truthfully right now. For example, waking up to the stark realities of climate science. It is to hear the alarm and respond, though without being alarmist, which is a tactic that is already proving negative with its anxiety-inducing outcomes. Instead, what if we were to take climate change not just as a threat, but as an opportunity, and an opportunity to deepen our humanity, an opportunity to respond to the reality by working to liberate ourselves and our descendants from a dark future, not be paralyzed by fear. Such a struggle, according to McIntosh, requires us to challenge the powers that be, that is, those who want to hold on to the status quo for some reason or other, whether politicians, big business, or global corporations. And there will be some people here who maybe have engaged in that struggle in ways that have involved risk to their own safety or even to their reputation. And Mackintosh is one of those people. And you can read, I would recommend you do, read about some of his incredible stories and his successes in that regard in his books. And I've just shared 2 of them here. There are many more. But for others of us, engagement is perhaps less confrontational, though nonetheless important. And that brings me to the work of our Eco-Quaker group. In our Eco-Quaker group in South Belfast, we've worked together to understand for us what the challenges are and to take our own actions. There's just a few of us here, and the group is bigger than this, but these are people who are just gathered around the Eco-Congregation's candle on this occasion. The group began around 4 years ago, and none of us were experts, and we really felt that what we needed to do was to begin by building our own knowledge and awareness of environmental issues. And talking, we felt, was important in and of itself. And I would agree with Hannah Arendt, the German thinker, who believes that positive life-affirming actions don't arise from nowhere, but they arise from speech. In other words, in dialogue, focused on a common cause, we can begin to make a difference. Talking is a form of action in itself, as I hope we'll find later tonight. So in the beginning, we met to share concerns and ideas for individual action. Some of us had more knowledge than others, I guess, and Tony Weeks, who's on the left of the picture as you look at it, was one friend who had expertise, and he brought us, introduced us to alternative economics and the idea of the Green New Deal. And in time, this grew into a short course, which was offered to others. I think as a group, I could say we have become enlightened about the fundamental connection between climate justice and social justice. And as our circle widened, we learned about community projects, we've learned about cooperative housing, renewable energy, universal basic income. And I think, like another Quaker writer, Douglas Gwynn, we've come to see that sustainability is not just one more concern among many, but the framework in which Quakers today must contemplate, even rethink every aspect of our Quaker faith and practice. It's that important. Progress in addressing the climate crisis, I believe, requires building sustainable communities. And sustainable communities require just, peaceful, equitable societies. Our contribution has, similar to Elders for Earth, I think, been to begin by being a community and then reaching out to others and building conversations. We've been educating ourselves and widening our circle as we draw others in. And we've also gone beyond our comfort zone, I think, beyond the confines of our own religious society to other places and spaces. And one example of that is the Imagine Festival, which is a Belfast festival of ideas. And we have participated in that last year, and we hope to host the Living Earth project at the Imagine Festival this year. So among us, as well as involving in these festivals, we share opportunities to participate in petitions and campaigns by email. And I think importantly, we sustain each other and attempt to cultivate hope. I don't mean naive optimism, but a hope grounded in reality of our situation that recognizes the positive potential that we can make a difference. But we can, while we can make a difference on our own, we can do it better together. As Tom Shakespeare, a Quaker writer, said, we need connections. We are all interdependent. We do better with others. But as well as cultivating hope, I hope we attempt to challenge ourselves within the group and within our wider Quaker community. Again, as Douglas Gwynn says, we cannot retreat into enclaves of economic privilege and oases of protected environments while the unfolding crisis ravages swathes of the planet. I have to be honest with you and say that Quakers in Ireland, Britain and America are mostly located within middle-class communities that take unhealthy consumption for granted. Our work then is to hold a mirror to ourselves, while at the same time remembering that we do not need to be perfect before we can get involved in trying to change and live more sustainably. But inevitably, there are times when we are intimidated by the size of the challenge, as I'm sure you all are, and ask ourselves again, what can we do when the task is so great and we are so few? And sometimes we need to break that challenge into smaller goals or manageable actions. And going back to Alistair McIntosh, one of the things he recommends in his book, one of his books, is 5 suggestions for teenagers, which I really like when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I'll list the 5 here. The first one he says is, these are 5 things we can all do, as well as teenagers. Learn the ways of nature and of climate science. Number 2, learn how to fix things, grow things, cook things, tell stories, and to give and have fun. And I suppose one of our examples of learning to sew when you're 70 is a good model in that regard. Have conversations, number 3, across the garden fence with real people in real time in real places. Build community and choose to work in ways that show the kind of world we want to be. And lastly, cultivate your interior life. As I say, I think this list is as important for those who aren't young as for those who are, but in 2 ways. It is a list definitely that we could follow, but looked at in another way, I think this is a statement of the need for intergenerational interdependence. For how can these young teenagers learn the ways of nature, to fix things, cook things, and tell stories if they don't have teachers, mentors, and elders to help them along the way? So it's an indication for us that we can dig where we stand, or at least we may not have to look too far to help others to do some of these things. By passing on our skills, whether fixing, cooking, or growing, or knowledge of nature, or having a conversation, or as we are now, being part of a community. In these basic ways, we can begin to make a difference. So the wonderful thing is that helping to address climate change is also the same as creating better communities. But to conclude this section on the view from below, I want to come back to the point that we can often feel overwhelmed. And I just want to let you know about one aspect of the Quaker tradition that I think helps in this regard. And it is called the practice of concerns. Now, we all know the meaning of the word concern. It's something that doesn't need translated or explained. But within Quakerism, concerns are special responsibilities. One Quaker writer, Thomas Kelly, puts it like this: a concern is a particularization of my responsibility in a world too vast and a lifetime too short for me to carry out all responsibilities. So in this way, Quakers attempt not to feel overburdened. They focus on what they can do. So we are not paralyzed by the immensity of the challenge. And secondly, we are reassured that there are others who are prioritizing other things that at that moment we cannot. So a third question that I have for you: what are your particular concerns? And is there anything you need to let go of in order to focus on these or this one concern more? All right, I think I'm doing okay for time. I'm coming to the final view from above. So this is to see ourselves from beyond our immediate concerns. You might call it a God's eye view or a cosmic view, not just an ancestral view, which is our place in history, but this is our place in the universe. A core Quaker text, Quaker Faith and Practice says, seek to know one another in the things which are eternal, which is other language, I think, for the view from above. I often count myself really fortunate to live at a time when we know so much about our planet and our place in the solar system and its place in our galaxy, and itself one of billions of stars and planets and galaxies. And this too can help, I think, locate us from an above perspective. Although personally, I find that hard to hold on to. Traditionally, religion, however, has provided a different way to gain this view. Quakers, for example, believe that it is accessed from within through the sustained practice of silence and stillness. As I said to you at the start, stand still in the light is what George Fox exhorted his followers. And personally, while I love a science documentary, it is this practice of standing in the light that allows me access to a deeper sense of the nature of being. Another Quaker writer puts it this way: set free and cast away from the world and its concerns, we come to navigate layers of silence, to reach towards the mystery and unknowability of God. We seek down within ourselves to find that which we cannot ever fully fathom. So the light in Quaker language lifts the veil to let us see how things really are. And seeing the world illuminated by the light opens our eyes to that of God in everyone. But it also illuminates the reality of injustice, violence, and harm on the other. And this includes harm to all species and harm to the environment. The Quaker feminist writer Grace Jansen points out that female Quaker writers like Margaret Fell and Dorothy White and others have been particularly attuned to this. She says, if they aimed to answer that of God in everyone, it could not be done by violence. Rather, they sought to discern and cooperate with the divine life. Hence, their particular approach left room for ecological concern rather than exploitation and domination of the physical world. So I'm trying here in this final view to draw a line between how we treat the world, how we treat others, and how we understand ourselves. As Gwyn puts it, the urgent search for a sustainable life is no less an urgent search for deeper grounding in our personal lives and our group practices. So in a Quaker view, there can be no right relationship with the earth without a just and peaceful society, and that begins by standing in the light. So I hope I've provided you with some ideas of how, as a Quaker, I draw on the resources from within my tradition to understand my relationship to the earth. And that brings me to my final question. What about your context? What are the spiritual teachings or practices that you can draw on in order to cultivate a right relationship with the earth? So thank you so much for listening. And I hope you've learned a little bit about a Quaker view of the world from it. But as I say, what I would love now is for us to engage in a little bit more conversation. So I'm going to hand over to Mary, I think, to take it from here. But I think we're going to go into about groups of 5 or 6, and there'll be 4 questions. But I just want to say before, of those 4 questions, it's not important that you answer them all. It's simply conversation starters. So maybe in your group, you might just feel that there's one question that speaks to you and that you think is important in your group, and you can have a conversation around it. And if there's 2 questions or 3, then fine, go for it. But they're just there for you really to reflect on and to have a bit of a conversation around for 10 or 15 minutes. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to one of the elders.
Welcome to everybody back to this part of our evening, and just to thank you, James, for a very inspiring presentation. And just in our group, our breakout group, we found the questions really were very much key to that inspiration and to I suppose to the encouragement you're offering us. So anyone who has any, if anyone wants to ask James directly some questions or comments, there was a comment in the chat already earlier from from Jeremy Bowden, who said that he loved the picture, the image of the green and the jay and the tree. I think he found fantastic, which reminds me that, yeah, I found those pieces of art very inspiring, and I look forward to seeing them in Cork. Hopefully they make it to this side of the world. So I don't know if there's any questions or.
And if there are no questions, then
Yeah.
people may just wish to make a comment as well about something that came out of their group on, you know, in the general discussion. So it doesn't need to be a question to me.
Okay, well, actually, if you don't mind, I'll start off, James, myself, because I wonder, would you speak a bit more about the, you linked community, you know, community involvement and hope. I think, I just wondered if you could speak a bit more about the importance of being part of a community and sustaining, I suppose, sustaining some sense of hope around what we can achieve.
I think being with other people can be both positive and negative. And I know from my own work, when I work with students in education, and I often have to say to them to take care not to engage in spirals of doom. And sometimes we can feed off each other's worry and concern and anxiety. And so being together in itself doesn't necessarily mean that we will automatically feed each other with hope. But I think that's where the sort of the grounded spiritual aspect of a community or of a group can make it a community. In other words, a community of togetherness and a community of hope. And just having the language of hope within a tradition, whatever that tradition be, and it can also be outside as well as inside religion. But I think particularly religion brings a lot to the table, and I know my own tradition brings a lot to the table when it comes to thinking about people positively. And the fundamental commitment of the Quaker tradition is there is that of God in everyone. So therefore we are hopeful about everyone, and that hope should express itself in how we engage with each other. Just on the question of hope, I'll just mention one other thing, and that is an author who I've been very inspired by called Rutger Bregman. He's written 2 books, one Utopia for Realists and the other Humankind. And both of those attempt to try and help us to, particularly in the West, to reposition ourselves in relation to hope and positivity. And the first thing he says is stop watching so much of the news, because it's not very hopeful. No. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer.
There's some questions in the chat, and one question from Anne McDermott. Will the exhibit be in Dublin or Kildare or Kilkenny at any time?
So as far as I'm aware, and others here can correct me, but the exhibition is in Belfast, Craigavon, Derry, Cork, and I don't think we've got hosts for it in Dublin. That's my understanding at the moment. Yeah, I see Dennis is nodding his head. I know there are other people here, but I can't see them on my screen at the minute who might speak more authoritatively about it. But, they can interrupt me if I've got that wrong.
There's a message that from Denise that it will be in the Cork Quaker Meeting House.
Bronwyn.
Oh, and there's Bronwyn. Yes, Bronwyn, go ahead.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any hosts in Dublin to host it, and therefore it's not at the moment going to Dublin. If there was a distinct group of people who could take it on, we could probably negotiate to get it to be exhibited in Dublin or Kilkenny or Kildare.
Okay. So if people knew of if people knew of hosts or locations, who would they contact about it?
Bronwyn, sorry, you're muted, Bronwyn.
Yeah, you're muted.
You could contact me through James if you like, if that's okay, James.
Yes, absolutely fine. So obviously Joan and the rest of the team in Elders for Earth have my contact, so pass it on and I'll pass it to Bronwyn.
Okay, great.
It would be, the dates would be roughly from about the 24th of April
Onwards,
for about a week.
or for a week. Okay. It's staying a week in each location, you mean, is it?
Yes.
Okay. There's a raised hand from Denise and Richard. Denise.
Thank you. I just wanted to put a thought out there. James has referred to our Quaker belief of that of God in everyone. And I sometimes think part of what we need to work at, one of our challenges, is to broaden that to a belief of that of God in every living thing. And I think if we can start to do that, it really will transform how we look at the world.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Denise, I agree.
Could I ask James a question there? My understanding is that the Quakerism came from, or is a branch of Christianity from the Anglican Church, and it branched out as part of the tree of Christianity. Is that the correct? I mean, am I right there, or?
Yeah, that's right, Patrick. It would have emerged in England during the 18th century and the 17th century, and it probably the people left the Anglican Church at that time in order to form the Quakers. I'm not a Quaker historian, and I know there are others here who are better qualified to speak about that aspect of the faith than me, but it does come out of and continue to see itself broadly within the Christian tradition and the Protestant dissenting tradition, probably is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, okay, thanks. No, I was just wondering about, you know, that, you know, the Passion of Christ and the resurrection and you know, peace. I know the dying in the light is similar, but it just worries me sometimes when all our values in Western society, civilization, come from Christianity, and I suppose it's an important inheritance, I think. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, somebody wants to know, sorry, James, I was trying to find it here. Amanda Bell would like to know if you could give her the names of the Quaker feminist writers that you mentioned.
The name of the Quaker feminist writer was Janssen. Her first name begins with G, which I've forgotten, and sadly she's no longer alive. But
was Grace her name? Sorry,
yes,
Grace Johnson, I think.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, so that you maybe want to have a look and see. She's a couple of books that are quite well known.
Is there somebody with their hand up again?
This is Denise again. I just wanted to make a brief comment about this question of Quakers and the Christian tradition. Although Quakers do view themselves as broadly fitting into the Christian, underneath the Christian umbrella, that the belief of that of God in everyone includes those who are not Christian. So it literally is everyone. And Quakers also have the idea of a kind of everyone having an inner teacher, which we need to learn to listen to. And we believe that that's true of everyone as well. So although I understand some of Patrick's concern that in some ways the Western world is a bit too homogenous, maybe, I think that there's room to actually broaden things within the framework we have.
Okay. Rosalind Duke.
Can I
Sorry.
say something on that?
Yes. Yeah.
I haven't been a Quaker myself, but I have attended the, what do you call it, meetings, or it's been a while now since I was there, but I have attended some. Within Christianity, we have denominations that usually consider themselves totally within the circle of Christianity. In Quaker, it's different in that it's an overlapping circle. There are Quakers who are within the circle of Christianity, but then there are other Quakers who, there's a whole range, a whole spectrum of understandings and beliefs. Quakers that are within the circle of Christianity often refer to themselves as evangelical Quaker, and there are other names that, like evangelical, that denote that it's a more formal or structured within Christianity. But you can find a whole lot of different Quaker positions, both inside and outside. And the other thing I wanted to say was that in America, in the USA, where I'm at, we now consider ourselves post-Christian. There are many people here in the US that have no upbringing within Christianity, who don't carry Christian values because they know very little about it. Because we have so many refugees and migrants and immigrants and so on that are coming from all over the world. Many different faiths and beliefs are practiced here now. And many have left the church totally. Even the previous generation, they left, and now their children were raised up without Christianity. So it's not all Christian values here anymore. A lot of it is not Christian values.
Can you hear me, Joan? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Terry. Yeah, yeah.
No, I just have a kind of comment and a question. What struck me was, James, when you pardon? Can you hear me? Oh yeah. What struck me was when you mentioned you had a bit of a burnout, a bit of a burnout when you sorry, is my voice breaking up?
No.
No.
Or somebody, maybe other people have their.
Oh no, it's okay. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
It sounds like it's breaking up, but
No,
sorry.
it's fine, Terry. Yeah, I can hear you.
That you had a bit of a burnout at some point, and that's what. But initially you went to the Quaker meeting and you didn't find any connection there, so you had the burnout, and then you went back and you felt, belong, part of it. It just immediately sat with you, and it just strikes me very much that, in a way, whatever title we have, Christian, Buddhist, non-Christian, it's the interbeing and the interconnection that really seems to matter and seems to gel when people connect like that. Because and in the silence, I suppose, in that silence, it's very, very, very easy, very tangible. And I just said it's amazing, isn't it? You went and then and then you had your bit of a burnout, and then you went back and you felt that connection, and I think that's beautiful. Really, it spoke to me. As I'm part of a Sangha in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, and I know when we sit together, I sometimes feel we're just sitting we're not sitting as personalities at all. We're just sitting as connected. We're just connected, and that's it. I mean, it doesn't last. When you come out, you probably get into the personality thing again, but it's just that lovely feeling of, in the silence, there's no, you know, there's just connection, really, and which is hard to maintain in everyday life. But I just thought that was lovely. It struck me very, very forcefully when you said that. It was very clear, you know, so thanks for that. Yeah, and thanks for your wonderful talk. I really loved it, and I love the images as well, and the art, to look forward to it. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Terry. And I think when I reflect on it, when I went as a young person to the meeting, I was probably wondering, what can I get out of this for me? And I didn't get much out of it because I didn't know what to do with the silence. I think I went back at a later point in my life where I kind of knew how to deal with the silence, and I knew what it was about because I had the tools to be able to deal with it. And I was hesitant about mentioning my experience, but I deal with so many young people at the moment who experience very serious, crises and anxiety and mental health issues. And I realize the importance of just being able to be honest about those things and talk about them and get them out into the open. And while I don't like, to bore people with it, I just felt that it was important to say it. Because we need to acknowledge how important and it is in all of our lives.
There's somebody, Martin has his hand up, I think.
Yes, yes. Again, thank you, James, for that talk. One particular thing that struck me about what you said was to prevent us going into the what we could call the spiral of despond, because some of the existential questions that we are facing now that we as a species have never faced before, it can get overwhelming. And one of the issues that you raised was sharing, or it seemed to me to be sharing that burden by recognizing that other people are picking up part of the load and dealing with different issues amongst the strain we're potentially all under. So thank you for that, James.
Thanks, Martin.
Two other participants have their hands up, so I can't quite see who they are.
I think
Frank anyway. Frank has his hand up.
Yeah, I think I was one of them. Thank you. And thank you for that wonderful talk, James. I'd just like to raise a question and hear your views about hope. When I think about hope, I see different meanings to it. One, I suppose, is the hope that we'll get through this and that things will be good again. Hope for survival, hope that our descendants will have a world they can live in, hope even for progress. But I'm also aware of various theological traditions that say, well, it's quite possible that from a Christian point of view, at least, that this is one of the many dead ends in an evolutionary world. God has perhaps hundreds of thousands, billions, perhaps other planets, we don't know. And lots of species have gone extinct. There have been lots of things that look like progress and so on. So that's one aspect of hope for survival. I suppose I was brought up in a Christian tradition that didn't look to hope in this world basically at all. Hope was always for the next world. And what a third view that in some ways I fall back on is the view expressed by Václav Havel, that wonderful Czech writer, when he says hope isn't the same as optimism. It's not the belief that things will turn out well, but the belief that however they turn out, this makes sense. And that's for me an important thing to hold on to, that I'm not necessarily committed to saying I'm hopeful that everything is going to be all right in 50 years or in 100 years or in 1,000 years, but that this is the task I have now, however it turns out. But I'm always curious about what people mean by hope. So I'd love to hear you say something about that.
I think I would talk about the difference between transcendence and immanence, Frank, from drawing on some of my theological learning. And I grew up in a tradition of Christianity that was thoroughly had a transcendent view of God, a view of God that was completely otherworldly, and all of the hope was in the other world. All of the hope was in what happens after we die. And a Quaker tradition has a very different view of God as immanent, as acting in the world and through us and through all people. And given that the idea of the kingdom of God not in the present and the now, as you would want to say, then we are grounded and also have the potential to find hope in everyone if we recognize it, and find hope in our world and in other situations. But so often that it's covered up and we can't see it. So it is about finding using the spiritual practices, I suppose, to find and allow the light to come through, and realize that that light is in the present, and that we must therefore build the present, build the hope in the now, and not wait for it in some afterlife, because we need to get on with the business of it now. So I would suppose that would be the kind of a theological view from a Quaker tradition of where hope lies. It's very much an immanence rather than a transcendence.
Yeah, I understand that, and that makes sense to me, that it's not transcendent. But is there also a hope? Do you have to make the same step, not just from the transcendent to the immanent, but from the future to the present? The second part of the question, as it were, is the hope that something will be okay in the future? Or is it enough that you find hope, that you find the light in people in the now?
Well, as I say, we try to extend it into the future, that hope. And I think for any of us who have contact with young people, I think that's so important, that we continue to engender that hope, and allow them to feel the ability to control and take hold of things. So yes, but that's, I suppose, still in the present, as it were. So how far into the future do you go? But certainly this worldly hope is what I'm talking about, which I think we need to cultivate.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Hope that answers.
Can I just say that Maureen, I think, has asked something about the young, Maureen O'Brien. So I had my own response to it, but I wonder, Maureen, would you like that? Would you like to ask the question yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Eileen. Yeah, I found the presentation, James, really stimulating. And I suppose it's a question. I'm an elder, and I have a lot of contact with young people. But I was kind of interested in maybe turning the thing on its head a bit and saying, well, what do we have to learn, from young people now? And I suppose as an educator, you probably, have a lot to say about that. I think I myself, and maybe many of us think we have something to give, but I'm not so sure if we actually listen or can, to what we might learn, and hence, the intergenerational, I suppose it's a circularity for me,
I realize we haven't much time, so I'll answer briefly. I mean, I think Greta Thunberg does a great job in reminding us of the importance of listening to young people. And I think it has been a surprise to me, and maybe a bit of a revelation just in the last few months about often when I have a chance to speak to young people about this issue, I in the past would have tried to emphasize their responsibility and, you know, the seriousness and the possible awful things that can happen if they don't, you know, sit up and take notice. And it's only in the last few months I've realized how actually damaging that is and anxiety inducing. And what I've learned from young people listening to them is that that's not helping. And therefore, we do need to listen. We do need to take action ourselves and not put it all on them. And we also must try and hold this idea of hope for them as well. That's what I'm hearing and from my contact with young people. Because it is easy just to say, oh, well, this isn't our problem. You know, they've got to fix it and take responsibility, but we can't do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Joan, I don't know where Joan has gone, but I was told to keep things definitely on time. So it's now 8:30. Not that I don't want to answer any more questions, but I'm just conscious that the group are keen to keep on time. Joan has disappeared, though. Maybe Mariel.
We tend to finish on time as far as possible. So
Okay.
yeah, so we might just close now and thank you. I hope Joan has returned to us. It was really just a wonderful evening. I really loved your presentation. I loved all the different levels of it and your own kind of honesty about yourself as well, and really appreciate the audience and the participation of everybody and your willingness to go to the breakout rooms, which was a kind of a first for us to try out. And we can only learn by doing this, and we learn you know, by doing each session of our series. So I'll finish by just sharing a poster for the next event and also invite you to leave, because those of us who were on the steering group and James might just stay for a bit of a chat at the end. So thank you.